How's that going?
Yeah, so I started making YouTube videos around this time. During my first year, I did hire a coach as well. He was sort of a real estate investing coach.
Okay.
And the idea there was I wanted to learn from someone who had been in Niagara for a while, just to kind of learn from their experiences, right? I want to know what's a good neighborhood, what's a bad neighborhood. And that really helped because the first investor clients I was working with, I could share the information I learned from him.
Sense.
And then it gave me more credibility. Because it's like, even though I was new to the area, they were new to the area.
Yep.
I knew more than them, right? So
I remember when I got into real estate, and you feel like you don't necessarily know that much, especially as you're green. But I remember an older agent saying, like, you still know more than the client.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like sometimes the barrier, right? Okay, you know more than the next person. Okay, that's good. We just got to keep working with that, right? And so
100%.
You knew more than the client. You were be able to advise them, and just kind of sounds like you're getting your feet wet by just jumping into the fire here.
Yeah, and I got a couple of clients from him as well. Right?
Okay. Oh, from the coach.
So he had like a little investment group. So they had a few people he connected me to. One of whom actually ended up working with me for quite a while. We bought quite a few properties together. So that really, really paid off to get that experience from a mentor, right? And then about a year later, when I was leaving that team I was on initially, that's when I hired Ben Osterwell, who was a coach we both worked with for many years. And the reason behind that is I had learned from the investment side. So I felt like I had a pretty good grasp of like how to help an investor.
Well, you had like 7 properties, so you had
and my own experience. Definitely that
a little bit of a track record behind you, which does help.
That definitely helped. But now I was like, okay, I really need to learn from someone who has done this realtor thing for a while. Yeah. Right? And Ben had built a team out in Edmonton. He had worked with, as an agent for close to a decade, right? Team had been going for quite a few years. I was like, okay, let me learn from him. And that got a lot of the system side of things in our business.
Okay.
So initially my wife became my first admin and also helped me to implement, many of the systems we have in our back end. Even with sort of making the videos, I leveled up to, hiring people to help me make it, help me edit it.
So how did I guess this kind of progression? Because you're going from like being some guy who's working for a team, getting a few off leads, jump out on your own, start working with an investment coach, probably just still dealing with mostly investors.
Yep.
And then now we're hiring a real estate coach, getting an admin, implementing systems. Like how are, from a deal kind of perspective, like how are you kind of evolving here over your years? Are you going from like 1 to 5 to 20, or is it a little more gradual?
The first full calendar year, I think I did something like, I want to say like 15 deals. That one referral source, this one agent was sending me clients. He was actually trying to step out of the business.
Okay.
Right. So that helps. That helped a lot.
Yep.
So I was like, send me everyone. I will service them. Right. So he was a really good source of clients. That team I was on was they also helped with a few deals. This investment coach was at the same time. So with that first year,
you got 3 things going on.
So I had 3 things to get that first year worth of business. And then I think in the second year is when the YouTube channel started to get me some clients. So one of the clients you've helped now, John.
Yes.
Right? He was the first YouTube client.
Really?
So I had this simple sign up form. He filled it in. He came out, met me, and I think I helped him purchase, this townhouse in Old Pine Trail in St. Catharines. Mm-hmm. That was in the first year, and then he ended up buying a couple more properties as well. So a big help was when I worked with the investor and I did a good job, they bought a second property. Like I had a few of those even within the second year.
Yeah, as opposed to working with, somebody who's going to move into their house, odds they're buying another home.
Yeah.
Not high.
Not high, right.
But you get an investor property, things start making money, they're making money, they're like, I want to keep doing this. So you're getting, okay, that's good. You're kind of leveraging the client as best as you can as well.
And at that time, the price of homes were lower, so the commissions were less, but it was easier for investors to get in as well, right?
Yes.
To tell someone to buy a $300,000 house is different from a $600,000 house.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and to them, it's like, we bought one, didn't deplete all our savings. Let's go out, buy
it again.
The second one, right? So
awesome. Yeah. Okay, so you're kind of plugging away here. Your first calendar year, now second calendar year, we're in the middle of 2018, kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
And YouTube channel starts coming in, starts doing some good there, and then I guess, how do we kind of get to, you started a team not that long after that, I guess a year-ish?
Yeah, so
2 years after that?
Starting a team had been on my mind I think pretty much from close to the beginning.
Okay. You're working for a team. You're like, I want to be that guy because he seems to be having way more fun than I'm having working for him.
I don't know if that was my inspiration,
Okay.
but I think I kind of saw it as something that fit me a little bit more because I think, we've talked about this a few times, right? But my mind is more geared into things that I can systemize, that I can look for problems I can solve that.
You can really tell that your father was an engineer. You kind of have that engineering mind in you for sure.
Maybe.
Right? Seriously though,
Yeah.
I've known you now for a few years, and you're very much that's the person who has you're very good at systems, implementing systems, and that's kind of what more of that engineer type mindset as opposed to a sales role type thing. Okay, that makes sense.
Well, I thought just if I even with our YouTube channel, right, when it was working great in terms of generating clients, I didn't think that I could service all the clients who were reaching out.
Right.
So already at that point I was like, oh, if I had other team members, they could all benefit from the fact that I have this YouTube channel, that I was sending out this weekly newsletter, that I was doing these things where they were somewhat scalable activities for me. So I was just doing it once, but the benefit didn't have to just come to me. It could help a few people.
Right.
That was kind of the thought process. So 2020 comes around, COVID comes. I still remember 4 to 5 weeks where I was watching Netflix. It was great. It was a break that I didn't have for the first couple of years.
Yeah.
And I think I also had pangs of fear mixed in there. I was like, how long is this gonna last? I want to work again. This is getting too much. And I remember, I forget the exact number, but my wife and I tallied up all the cash in our bank accounts. How many months can we survive if this thing continues? And I think it was 6 to 9 months on beans and rice. If we're paying our bills and we're doing nothing, this is how long we can last.
Yeah.
That was a scary thought, right? All my money was in real estate at this point. I had bought these properties. They had equity, but short of selling them, it wasn't in my pocket, right? So anyway, that was the time. But thankfully, that only lasted I think 4 to 6 weeks.
I remember that time. It was beginning of March, 2020, and all of a sudden the real estate market you hit pause. I remember I had a couple listings at that time, and you would get 2 showings, but you'd get an offer from those 2 showings because there was nothing happening, and it was only really, really serious people that were buying. And then shortly after, things kind of started to really change.
Yeah, because I think the key moment was when they gave the list of industries that were allowed to continue to operate.
Yes.
And I was like,
we were essential.
That was a big moment.
Oh my gosh, I remember that.
So, and then as soon as that came out, I was like, called my clients. At that point, people had started to figure out if their job or industry was affected.
Yeah, because if once they came out with this list, okay, we as realtors can continue to work, and then you as whatever you're doing, you're either you're getting laid off, or you're also going to be able to work. So people started to get a little bit of certainty in their own lives, at least, right?
And by whatever fortune, a lot of the investor clients I was working with had, I would say, better paying jobs that were more insulated, right? They were working from home, or there was something to it where I didn't have a lot of clients personally, gym owners or restaurant owners that were slammed in the face, you can't operate, right? So client base was okay. I had been sending out my videos, newsletters during this time, so I was still kind of staying in touch with them. And then by the summer, I bought another property by then, and quite a few of the clients were buying properties already, and it started just ramping back up. Around this time, my wife got pregnant.
Right.
So this said,
the COVID baby.
Yeah. My only baby.
But many other people had the COVID baby.
Yeah. So that gave somewhat of a deadline for this starting a team idea.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'd been with Ben coaching now for a few years, and I talked to many older men who had told me that one of the things they regret is working too hard when their first child or when their children were young.
Okay.
Not the whole time of their children, just that early time, because it's a time that comes, that goes by, and it just hit home for me. I was like, what, I've been working hard for the last few years. I I want a bit of a pulse.
Yeah.
And I think we had done a deal around November or
September.
September?
It was September.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think it closed in September, but yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
We
so
did it
September.
in September. Yeah.
My wife was still my admin.
Yes.
So she was the one dealing with you on some of the paperwork stuff.
Yeah.
And then she told me, hey, what do you think of this guy? And this is a curious part. Many realtors treat admins like they are second-class people.
Yes.
It's a very common thing in our industry.
It's unfortunate, but
unfortunately, even many clients. Because an admin will reach out to a client and a client won't respond. But if we reach out, they'll respond
right away. Yeah.
So my wife had been experiencing this from many other realtors. So I'd do a deal, she'd ask for like a sign, whatever, and then they don't respond, or she calls them, right? And then she was like, yeah, this guy responded to her the same as like what I had been receiving.
Right.
So you didn't differentiate between who was reaching out. I think you did something crazy. You picked up a deposit check from like Toronto or something for this deal because the client couldn't come. Anyways, and it stood out, right? And she was like, yeah, this guy seems like he's good in terms of the communication with her.
Yeah.
I thought our deal went fairly smoothly. I will say nothing stood out too crazily on our end of the deal. It was just a normal transaction.
It is a normal transaction, which is honestly the best.
Right? And I think both your client and my client were a little bit tough negotiators. I think we may have gone back and forth a few times on
I do remember that.
Yeah.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
And as somebody who's worked with that client for yours, he's still a very tough negotiator.
Yes. So anyway, so I think that went well. I think after the deal firmed up, we went out for a coffee and I just presented the idea, what do you think of us working together? I explained where I was at in terms of our business was at a place that we had more people reaching out that I could service.
Yes.
Right? And
we were in a very opposite place.
You had
yeah.
Exactly, right? And you had been in the business for about a year.
Yep.
Getting ramped up. You had experience, but you didn't necessarily have many sources of clients where you could work with people right away. You were still in that like figuring out where your clients were coming from.
And I was also dealing pretty much exclusively with buyers and regular buyers and sellers, end users as we would call them, right? Where you were doing exclusively almost investors.
Yeah.
At this time, I was also very interested in being an investor myself. We kind of had an opposite path, right? I became a realtor, then an investor. You became an investor, then a realtor.
That's right.
And so we kind of came at this from very opposite ends. So I'm listening to you talk about, I just got all these investor clients and like I'm working so hard, I just can't service them all. And I'm sitting there like, I'm working my ass just to try and find a single client so I can service them. So, it kind of was a perfect match, so to speak, right? But yeah. And
that really worked out because my daughter was born in March of that year.
Right.
Or 2021.
Yeah, the year was 2020, March of 2021.
So we had a few months. As soon as you joined, I think we were back to the place. I was servicing the clients I could service. Mm-hmm. At that point, I think I sent most of the newer clients to you, and then my existing client base, I was still trying to service them. And then by February, I was like telling my clients, look, my daughter's going to be born in a month. If you want to buy a house, you need to talk to Ryan.
You got to call this guy. Yeah.
Right? So that was a huge help. And I still remember that first 6 months, like that's a moment that you will never get back, right? And like I can confidently say I don't have that regret of not spending enough time. Mm-hmm. That may come between ages 3 and 6 because right now we're working really hard, but at least in those first moments, and I'm really grateful to you about that too. Like it's something that, yes, it fit the business, all of that, but I think on a personal level, like you being there and sort of working and being the person that I could count on, I think that mattered. Like I couldn't just relax if I knew that my clients weren't being taken care of, right? But knowing that you were going to take care of it, I could take a step back and just focus on family at that time. It made a big difference.
Yeah. No, that's it's weird, right? Because you'll never. Sometimes you don't realize what it is, like having your first child, right? I'm sure many people, you talk to many older men, but like many people when they have their first child, particularly in a business like you're in, where income's uncertain, there's a global pandemic going on, stock market's going all over the place, a lot of uncertainty. Many people would be very tempted to just, I need to go get some financial security for my daughter, and fortunately for you, where you were able to kind of talk to some other people and then take advantage of that option. And luckily enough, we kind of met, and financially, I think it all worked out well for everybody as well. But yeah, you got to kind of do that in the midst of like one of the craziest times in our lifetime so far.
In the middle of lockdowns and all of that, right?
It was wild. So we connect. Things kind of start rocking and rolling here. We're in the midst of like the hottest real estate market on record. We're selling things good. We end up getting another team member. When did he come?
So he came a couple of months before, so around January.
Yeah,
I think is when he joined.
I think it was like, I was going to say, I think it was the new year of 2021 or something like that. So he came before your daughter was born. Yeah. And then we were kind of all plugging away. And then eventually we added another team member. Yeah. When did he come? Do you remember?
Summertime, August.
Of same 2021.
Yeah, 2021.
Right. This was my friend Hanish.
Yep.
And I remember he was in a similar spot to where I was.
Yep.
He was newer than I was there, looking for stuff like that. I was like, hey man, I'm just plugged in with this guy. Stuff's rocking and rolling. You should come, rock and roll with us. And so now we're all running along. You eventually kind of, your daughter grows up a little bit. You take some time. You get back kind of into the business world, and here we are, I guess 2 years later, but we still had kind of some developments there. How did everything kind of progress from then, right? From basically, okay, here I am, I'm now getting a team is now rocking and rolling in a hot real estate market, but that doesn't last forever, right?
Yeah, so I think the big shift for us came in 2022, right?
Yes.
When the market slowed down.
So a year later, you start the team, rock for a year, and a year later things
pretty much. So we had a great 2021 and a great first half of 2022. And then the second half was like, not great. And a big component of our business was the investors.
Yeah.
And this is a tough time for investors because the cash flows, like we were primarily selling cash flowing investment properties.
That was our model.
Yeah. And that gave investors sort of an insurance policy.
Yep.
You knew that your property was going to make you money, so even if whatever happened with prices, you could hang in there. And then interest rates went from 1.5% to 6.5%, and all of a sudden the cash flow disappeared.
Yeah.
So we were in a especially tough spot because that didn't work with our model. We had to adjust, right? So it was tough to adjust. I think this 2023 has been that real adjustment where we have kind of put the focus more on how do we help regular people buying and selling homes.
Yep.
Figuring out how can those people get in contact with us, how can we provide value to them so that we can start those relationships, and then us as a team retooling to have what we need in order to serve those clients, right? Because we had kind of built out everything on the investment side, and we
had one client type, and we knew I was so confident that there was nobody else who could service that client type better than us.
Yeah.
Because we had such a specific client type.
Yeah.
Your regular end users are very broad clients, right?
Yeah.
You have everybody from people that are, 80 to people that are 20 and everywhere in between, and, divorce, kids, every different life stage, you're dealing with all sorts of people, right?
Yeah.
Where you're dealing with investors looking for not only a cash flowing profit, but we were pretty much doing like duplex conversions, right? We're doing very one type of investor, one type of property.
Yeah.
So it was very easy to kind of really dial in that process. And then when that's kind of gets blown up, it's like, wait a second, we have to dial in all these other processes.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes back to, when you were in the beginning, how you liked the processes and the procedures and kind of doing that. It was almost like, okay, Koukun, let's see what you can do. Let's let these skills shine again, right?
Yeah.
And so then we kind of built that, and now done that. I think so far going pretty well. We managed to weather probably one of the tougher years in the real estate market in a long time, at least from a sales number perspective. And now I guess why don't you give us a little color as to where you are now and where things look like for the future?
Yeah, so for me this next year, my focus is really on exactly what we described, right? How can I take the wins we've had this past year and really refine it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put layers on top of it and improve it. One of the other changes that I've made is I actually got my mortgage broker license, and we're going to bring that as a service in-house for our team. And this came after a few years of us. We've worked with multiple mortgage brokers over the years. We've helped make those connections, right? Our clients would tell us they need to get a mortgage, and we'd make a referral. Some have done a good job, others have done a terrible job. So there's
or even some that did a good job for 10 clients and then whatever, they got busy, they didn't have the systems in place, and then it's hard when you give somebody 10 clients and then on the 11th one the client's calling you and it's like they kind of drop the ball, right? So
and anyways, the thought process is this, right? We work so hard on the client experience. I think that is a central theme for our team, where it's not good enough for us to do a good job. Doing a good job is the baseline, and your client has to have a good experience as you do a good job.
Yep.
They seem like they're the same thing, but they're not. One involves like writing offers, doing the transaction,
having correct paperwork.
Correct paperwork. The other is like letting your client know ahead of time something bad is going to happen, or letting them know as things are happening, giving updates, communication. Like that is the client experience part of it. And
there's also, I think, even like, you can do a good job from a real estate perspective and not necessarily build trust or build a connection with that client.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a large part of the client experience.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can be a robot going through and do everything that you're supposed to do in a transaction and do your job as a realtor, and the client leaves and they don't even remember your name because you didn't do anything to like build a connection, build rapport with someone. Right. Whereas I think everything we've done, and especially the systems that have created, particularly, when it started, it was about, okay, how do we, one, obviously do our job, but then two, excel at that job where you can build a relationship with a client, you can build that trust with them where, they'll be the first person you call, they're not going to hesitate you because you guys have that relationship. It's not like a transactional relationship, right? So,
and all of that, the hope is like, can we bring that into the mortgage side? Because, the mortgage side has technical aspects. So, learn how mortgages get funded, how do you get approved, right? What's the best sort of the product knowledge side of it?
Yeah.
And that part, I've joined a good group of people at Synergy Mortgage. They're training me. I'm learning all the best practices from them. But I think the client experience side is what we've already been doing. And I feel like we can now almost level it up because we can control the experience for the client from start to finish. They come to us to help them buy or sell. We're helping them with that, and we're helping them with the mortgage, and we're ensuring that throughout the process there's a consistent level of like communication, advice, like, and really focusing on that from end to end. So that's the hope. And I will say this is something that I thought about doing even like 2 years ago. For whatever reason, I just thought, it's not something that we needed. But as I got my mortgage license and as I'm learning more about it, there's something about the work of the mortgage side that is clicking with me a lot more than I was expecting. Right?
Interesting.
And
what do you think that is?
I think it goes back to my personality type, which is like I like to solve problems. I like to like figure things out. And with mortgages, before I became a mortgage broker, I would ask all the mortgage brokers we were working with about what products do they have, what fits what are the restrictions, right? Like how many rentals can you have with a certain lender? After which, who do you go to, right? Like which lenders allow you to choose an appraiser and not. But they would only give me as much information as it made sense for them to give me because they had a job to do. It wasn't like their job wasn't to like teach me everything, right? Now it's like I'm learning directly from the different lenders of like it's the opposite. It's information overload, and I'm trying to like figure out, okay, what is important that I need to like summarize as like this is what I will use versus this is just data, right? But I prefer this.
Okay.
I prefer having a manual in front of me where I go through it and I figure it out versus I'm asking questions and then I'm only getting partial answers and I have to like piece things together. So it's just a personality preference. And I'm also enjoying the fact that before, when I had a client, if I were to pass it on to one of the team, a part of me that was sad was that I couldn't keep talking to the client.
Right.
And sometimes, I would tell them, hey, just call me if you need anything, if there's ever a time you need a second opinion. But you and Hanish, you guys are so damn good at your jobs that like once they start talking to you, they don't necessarily need to talk to me. They're getting the advice they need, which is perfect from a business aspect.
That's what we're looking for, but you're still missing out on that.
Yeah, but on a personal, I was like, I'd like to know more about what's happening, not like the deal's done, all right? So already, like the few times that we've been able to work together. I've just enjoyed the fact that, yeah, I get to give advice to the same client that you guys are helping right from the get-go, make sure things are going smoothly, update you guys as well so that we're all on the same page. And like even just a deal that I was doing the other week with our other team member, Hanish, like the lender had given us the commitment. Typically you firm up a deal when you have a commitment.
Yeah.
But because we were communicating this client situation, it wasn't enough to have a commitment.
Right.
We needed the lender to review something and give us the heads up. That part is okay, even though they've given us a conditional commitment.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't enough to firm up the deal. Right. So by all three of us really being on the same page, the client, myself, Nish, like we knew what we were doing when we were firming up, and eventually we had to firm up the deal without that approval. But the client knew the risk they were taking.
Right.
We really made sure, like, hey, look, this is what risk you're taking. Here's a worst case scenario. We have a backup plan for that. It's not as good as this one, but there is another option.
Yeah.
We need you to know this client before firming.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, that's good, because I think that's one of the things too. Is sometimes as a realtor, if, sometimes clients come to you and they've already got a mortgage broker, right? And it's great, and you give them a quick call. Yeah, they're good, they're approved, but you don't necessarily have that relationship with them, and then things can kind of change down the line because maybe they did get a conditional commitment, but it wasn't, this. I remember I had a deal recently in the past year where right now there's currently a foreign buyer's ban. So if you're not a permanent resident of Canada, you cannot buy a property. So we got a mortgage commitment and got the mortgage broker. Yeah, you're good to waive the mortgage condition. Like 3 weeks later, we find out that the client he's a legal person to be here, but he never went and got his PR card. And he didn't have any paperwork documenting this.
Oh, wow.
So now the lender's asking for this, but he doesn't have it. And now I'm, freaking out at the mortgage broker. So I'm like, dude, why didn't you tell me this? I just see that he's got a thing. You told me he's got a good mortgage. I'm assuming that, I didn't need to double check. Obviously, I should have double checked. But when you have this really kind of close relationship between the realtor and the mortgage broker, those little things don't get overlooked. Right? So obviously that's a worst case scenario. We don't want that to happen. But when you kind of have this really open line of communication, it allows you to service the client better, but also to prevent any of those surprises that may come down the road, which, like you said, from our first transaction, the smoother transaction, we don't want to be anything. There shouldn't be anything memorable in the transaction. It should be very smooth and very simple, right? So, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we chatted for a while here. Learned a lot about, kind of your evolution of things, right? And kind of how you kind of came in from, coming here to Canada, kind of starting off as an entrepreneur, going, kind of working for a nice T4 job, and, kind of the full circle thing. One thing that's really stood out to me about this, I would say, is kind of like your focus or your drive. You know what I mean? You didn't necessarily know how you were going to get somewhere, but you knew that you wanted to do something along that line, and you went full for it. Whether that's from starting a team to going off on your own to quitting your job to become a full-time realtor, buying rental properties. There's always this kind of like drive forward. Were you attributed that to you, or is there kind of like, some like pillars that you try and live your life by, or give us a little color as to why do you think that is?
I think, I don't know if there's a pillar per se. It didn't feel like I was driven in the moment. It was like we were discussing about having your back against the wall. I think it was the only option that I had.
Okay.
Right? So even buying rental properties, it seemed to me the only option I had for creating wealth for the future, or, establishing something for myself in the future. It seemed like the only path I had. So I was like, okay, this is the only path that I understand. I'm starting to figure out the pieces. Let me do that, right? Switching from sort of the T4 job to working in sales, again, was the only path I had. Right?
Yeah, because you couldn't go any further. T4 job.
Yeah. So I think it wasn't only recently will I say that I've had to assess having a few opportunities and picking one and excluding the others. Early on, it wasn't that I had many options. It was I had one option, or option B sucked. So let me just do my best at option A and really try to move it forward. I will say maybe I'll give myself a little bit of credit in hindsight that I do feel, looking back, that, yeah, I was a driven person. Like that 18-year-old kid was doing stuff that...
Well, nobody else was. No, I can tell you, I wasn't doing it at 18. And I don't think Hanish was doing it at 18. Actually, I know Hanish was 18. He wasn't doing it at 18. And most of my other 18-year-old friends were probably not doing that at 18, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yes, I will give myself some credit for that. Like, I think, to me, it was... Oh, I'll give you one example or one reason why this was. When I joined an ice hockey team.
Yeah.
In grade 9, I wanted to play for the NHL. I was serious about that.
Yeah.
I was serious. I was into the set big goals and like just believe it until it happens. And it was painful 2 years later when I was like, I have no chance at this. Like 0 chance at this.
Like those kids started skating when they were 6 months old, and
yeah. And you know what? I still like. I went to house league. I tried out for the single A team. I tried out for my high school team. I got rejected both times. And then I was like, the next thing I do, I want to be early. I don't want to be the guy who's 10 years too late.
Right.
And then, lo and behold, I choose real estate.
And you're about as early as you can legally be.
As early as you can legally be. That gave me, like, I was happy about it. I was like, now I'm early.
Yeah.
Now I'm doing stuff that people are going to think about when they're in their 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's good. I mean, yeah, that's a good life lesson though, right? Like, what is it? There's a saying or something like that where it goes, and you've either got to be early, you've got to either be like, know something other people don't, or something like that. And, your life experiences were like, you were kind of late, and then you're like, okay, let's make sure we get early on this next one. And now you're running with it, and, you've had some success. And how do you kind of like, I guess, keep that principle going forward? Because obviously, you're in it now, you're not necessarily going to be early to the next one, but how do you kind of keep that principle of, that work that's led to this success kind of going forward? Because let's be realistic here, you're still pretty young. You got a lot more than half your life ahead of you. So hopefully
two more lifetimes left.
Two more lifetimes left. Yeah.
So I think something that has come to mind recently is how grateful I am for that 18-year-old kid. So like my younger self hustling has resulted in, my wife and I owning a home now.
Yeah.
We own rentals. Now we're in this business, right? Like there's a lot that I appreciate about my life now that came from the hard work that I put in when I was 18. And I think moving forward, I want to do the actions today that my 38-year-old self is going to be like, I'm glad 28-year-old Koukun did those things, put in the hard work,
right?
Did the reps, right? So that at 38, and I don't know fully what that life looks like. I don't know if it is only financial success, career success, business success, but I think there's a component of family in there, right? Like being there for my daughter. Like, again, I think there's different ways to assess success, but I want the older version of myself to look back and be proud of the work that I do now. Yeah.
You say that's kind of something, like, I mean, it seems like it's how you live your life. You've this kind of investor delay gratification for future self kind of thing. Is that, it sounds like that may be the kind of a big pillar in your life, right? Like kind of looking out for future you.
That was definitely the pillar when I was 18. Saving 75% of your income is delaying gratification. Like there's nothing in the present at that rate. I've shifted a little bit from that. Like I'm not delaying happiness for the future. Like I want to enjoy more of the present, but I think this mindset of like do the work so that tomorrow is going to be better than today.
Yeah.
10 years from now is going to be better than today.
You're not going to necessarily delay happiness, but you're not going to pursue happiness even if it'll hurt your future self.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah. So like don't act against the best interests of your future self. Right? Yeah. So I think that's a big one for me where, I don't know, in my mind, future Koukun and past, maybe this is like multiple personality disorder, but my future self and my past self are almost independent of me. And I want to like treat them as people and like
treat those people well.
And treat them well.
Yeah.
Right. Because sometimes it's hard to like think of like, how do you treat yourself well in the present? Because you are yourself, right? But your future self, there's a lot you can do that will hurt that person or help that person.
Yeah.
Right? And
absolutely. sometimes it's just not watching that extra Netflix show and just getting to sleep, so that when you go to the gym in the morning, you feel a little more rested.
That is for damn sure, man.
Wow, this has been a while. I really enjoyed learning a lot more about you. I hope our audience did as well. I think we could probably go on here for a long time diving into lots of these little things, and maybe we'll do something like that in the future. But I really appreciate you sharing everything you shared with us today. Is there anything else you want to kind of end this off with?
Yeah, no, if you're watching to the end of it, you watched like
you're committed
over an hour of this video, and I appreciate you taking the time to kind of learning my story and hearing more about it. Let me know in the comments if there was anything that stood out to you, or if you had any questions about anything you've heard. Until next time, all the best.